I'm not a lawyer, but do y'all remember the case of Adnan Syed? His story was the one that was covered on Serial the first season. Well, today he was back in court, and the results from all of this could determine if he ends up back in jail. Let me fill you in. Now, there's a lot to this story, and it has quite a bit of a timeline. So I'm going to give you my quick and dirty TikTok recap to get you caught up. So on February 25th, 2000, 17-year-old Adnan Syed was found guilty of kidnapping, false imprisonment, robbery, and murder, all in connection with the death of his 18-year-old girlfriend at the time, Heyman Lee. Adnan was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. That was in the year 2000. In 2014, the true crime podcast Serial covered his case, and what they alleged were inconsistencies and ineffective counsel. They basically said that his attorneys did a bad job, and the investigation was shoddy at best. So in 2015, a year after the podcast came out, Adnan was granted a new hearing in which new evidence could be presented. At that hearing, the judge agreed Adnan's attorneys did a bad job. And by bad job, I mean that they were grossly negligent. And the judge agreed to give him a new trial. But then the prosecutors appealed. They said, nah, let's take this to the Court of Special Appeals. So 3 years later, the Maryland Court of Special Appeals decided Adnan's original attorneys were negligent and ineffective. So they vacated his conviction. The state prosecutors appealed again. It's important to say right here that even though Adnan's conviction was vacated at this point, since the prosecutors put in that appeal, Adnan was not released from jail. He was not granted bond to be freed. So a year later, in 2019, at the hearing for the second appeal, the courts ruled that even though Adnan's original attorneys were indeed negligent, their negligence wasn't enough to have made a difference in his trial. So that court reinstated his conviction. So they're like, yeah, he's guilty again. Then in September of 2022, there was another hearing. And at this hearing, Baltimore prosecutors said that new DNA testing actually excludes Adnan from the evidence. So they dropped the charges against him. And after over 20 years of being in prison, 41-year-old Adnan was finally released. But then another appeal. On March 28th, 2023, so just a couple months ago, there was a hearing for this last appeal. And at this hearing, the appellate court, the Court for Appeals, reinstated the conviction again. The judge ruled that the September hearing, where the new DNA came out and the charges were dropped, that hearing violated the rights of the victim's family because apparently Maryland law says that victims have a right to be notified in advance of hearings that would vacate a conviction. So Heyman Lee's family, specifically her brother, whose name is Young Lee, says that he was notified on Friday that the hearing was going to take place that following Monday. Mind you, he lives in California and the hearing was in Baltimore. So he says that wasn't enough time for him to attend the hearing in person. And because of that, his rights were violated. And because of that, the courts ruled Adnan's conviction still stands. Even though his conviction was reinstated, he didn't have to go back to jail yet. So that gets us to today. Today, both sides presented their argument in front of the Baltimore Supreme Court, and now they have to decide if that September hearing was actually a violation of Heyman Lee's family's rights, and if so, should the conviction remain reinstated? And if so, should Adnan Syed go back to jail? If they rule that September hearing was not a violation of the victim's family's rights, this will be the end. No more appeals and no more jail for Adnan Syed. But it could take months for the Maryland Supreme Court to come back with an answer. So we wait. What do y'all think? Were the rights of the family violated, or should Adnan Syed remain free?